Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. It's the preview show for this weekend's All-Ireland Senior Football Championship action happening this weekend. Two provincial finals to look towards. We have Mayo taking on Galway. We've got Kerry taking on Clare, obviously in Ennis as well. We will be looking ahead to the hurling championship action a little bit later on as well. Few more hurling games this weekend than football games. Is a little bit unusual that you've got some Leinster games on, some Munster games on, but not all of them. But all in all, we'll be here to break down all the games for the next hour or so. So anyone who's tuning in, let us know in the comments your thoughts on some of the games, and let us know your predictions as well. Joined here by Seamus Brady from On Clithe, who's here to help me dissect the games down in more detail. Seamus, I suppose the last few weeks have been a little bit mental in Gaelic football. There's been so much happening in hurling, obviously, as well, across all codes, really. It's been a little bit crazy. So I suppose nice this week that there isn't as many games. And like there's no games clashing with each other as well, other than the Joe McDonagh Cup game. So you can actually enjoy them, you know, rather than be looking at three games at once. So I think that's going to be good.
Certainly, yeah. No, thanks for having me on again, Aaron. It's we've gotten used to the busy weeks, and I mean, even in general, like we're just finishing breaking down the league, and then straight into previewing the championship, and then the hurling championship is kicking off, and like whereas now this weekend there's a little bit more, as you said, just a tiny bit more breathing room between the games, so you can do like a full analysis breakdown, like stuff like that, and like myself and yourself and Matthew have all shared in that it's really hard to keep up with three games at once because you're going to be covering them on the weekend review show, and it's hard to like make sure you have everything, you don't miss anything in any of the three games, and reading every article that there's available about it to make sure that you know your stuff before the weekend review show goes in. So yeah, look, this weekend is going to be very interesting. There's the obvious game to watch, which is obviously the Mayo Galway game. That's the one that everybody's going to be keeping an eye on. And the group stage as well. Like we'll know who's in what group come the end of the provincial finals, which would be really interesting.
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll go. Obviously, I went through the group stage draw a little bit yesterday with a bit of a reaction, but we'll go through it again anyway and get your opinions on it. Because there definitely are some interesting games in there in both the All Ireland and the Tailteann Cup as well. But I suppose we'll start with the big provincial final of the weekend, Galway versus Mayo. I think that's the one that, no disrespect obviously to Clare and Kerry, but I think a lot of people will very much know how that game is going to go. But Galway versus Mayo in Galway, I mean, it's always tasty when Galway play Mayo. Interesting enough, Galway have only beaten Mayo once in the last 8 years, so their record against Mayo is very disappointing, and Pádraig Joyce's record overall against Mayo is quite disappointing, especially in the championship. But it's a hard one really to call. Like Galway are coming in not in a good place, you would say, after barely getting over the line against Sligo, and Mayo have kind of quietly been going under the radar as well. I don't think they were brilliant against Roscommon, but they got the job done. So it's kind of very hard to judge either of these two teams going into this.
It is. It's hard to know where they're at, but like to be honest, I'd say Mayo are probably quite happy with where they're at. Like right now, as in that people aren't hyping them up. They aren't talking about them as going for the All Ireland. Whereas last year, they'd beaten Galway in the league final, and everyone was talking them up as if it was a guarantee that Mayo were going to go for the All Ireland, and it fell flat on its face. Like they lost to Roscommon, and then they got absolutely outclassed by Dublin in the All Ireland quarterfinal. Like this year, they're moving along nicer. They've beaten Roscommon in the championship. Like the championship is the be all and end all. Mayo have made a better start to the championship 2024 than they did last year. So McStay, I think, will be quite happy with how the league has gone. I said at the start that I thought if McStay gets with Mayo and they go through the league and they just survive in Division 1 and then they do well and they win Connacht, I think he'd be absolutely chuffed with how that's gone. And we're nearly there. And like I truly think Mayo are in a better place than Galway because you're right, there's something off about Galway. I don't know what it is, but it's like they have the potential, if they had their 15 best players there, to have a side that could go for an All-Ireland. I mean, we saw last year when they were fresh off the All-Ireland final defeat the year before. They get Peter Cook and Ian Burke back into the squad. And you're thinking like, well, here we go. Here's Peter Cook, who was, the starting midfielder from about 2018, 2019, and a 2018 All-Star corner forward in Ian Burke back into the panel. Like, Galway are looking good. And they fell on their face when Mayo beat them in the qualifier, obviously, last year. Out they go. And, then they didn't make it out as far as they would have wanted to go until Mayo beat them. And then this year, Shane Walsh, we haven't really seen any of him. Damien Comer, we haven't seen any of him. Like, Peter Cook has stepped away. Cillian McDade is injured. We don't know when he's coming back. Tom O'Clahan is injured. They just seem like Matthew Tierney, as though we've seen very little of him on the pitch, like you would expect. It's injuries. So they just do seem a good bit away from being 100%. They definitely seem like that. And like, by hook or by crook, Joyce is having to make a deep Galway squad. He's having to turn to players that he might not have turned to before. Like people like Kane Darcy that were getting runs out for Galway that have been around for a few years but have never been selected. But now Joyce is in a situation where he's thinking like, half my team is missing. I need to turn to players I haven't turned to before. And being honest, I think Mayo are in the better position going into this game. Mayo have definitely had a harder route to the final. And when you see how hard it was for Galway to get by Sligo, that like, Sligo, they're improving, they're doing great, still a Division 3 team, and they still didn't manage to get out of Division 3. So for Galway to struggle with them the way that they did doesn't bode extremely well going into a game against Mayo.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. Plenty of comments flying in here. Oliver says Mayo need to throw the game. It's a group of death regardless of the outcome. Rommel says the losers will be the winners. Peter says not sure why draws were made before provincial finals. It is an interesting point. It's kind of a weird one, really.
It changes the preparation going into the provincial finals.
Yeah, just a little bit later on, but I'll throw them up on the screen maybe briefly just to remind ourselves as to what could happen. So like the Connacht winners will be with the Ulster runners up, then they'll be with Derry, Westmeath, and then the Leinster winner or the Connacht runners up will be, you'd imagine, be with Dublin, and then have Roscommon and Cavan, which you'd argue is an easier group than Group 1, because obviously you have Derry in Group 1, as the third seed as opposed to Roscommon. So there is some interesting points, and I've seen like a few people sort of mentioning that on Twitter and everything else. I don't know, the jeopardy doesn't really seem to be there for this Connacht final. I don't know if there's actually, I think both groups are very similar, to be honest with you. Yeah. I think arguably Group 2 is easier, but then you do have Dublin in there as well.
Like the reality is you're going to lose to Dublin. Probably.
Although that game would be in a neutral venue, so.
But I still think Dublin are way ahead of Galway right now. I think Galway aren't what they were last year, in my opinion. I remember Galway were serious dark horses to win the whole thing, and they just never really got going in that direction. So I don't know. It's difficult to know which one they'd want to go into, but that comment is definitely right that I'm not 100% sure why they did the draw before the provincial finals, because it does change your mentality and it does change how you are approaching that provincial final. That if Joyce or McStay looks at those groups and is like, I don't know which one but let's get this. They're not going to go out to lose. It's still a Connacht final. It's still a game with silverware on the line. I think they're both still going to go hammer and tongs to win it.
Yeah.
But I think it will be one of those situations where if they lose, they might be like, we probably have a better chance of getting out of the group now.
Yeah. Like, it's interesting, all right, because like Mayo obviously haven't won a Connacht title since 2021, I think it was. They've only won, I think, 2 Connacht titles since 2015 or something along them lines. They were obviously 2020 and 2021. So they'll obviously want to get over the line. Like, they'll want to beat their rivals, Galway. They'll want to get
McStay hasn't won one either.
Yeah, exactly.
With Mayo.
Yeah. And then obviously Galway's record against Mayo as well is quite poor over the last couple of years. So like they'll want to rectify that, in fairness. Oliver says you may lose to Dublin, but you avoid them for the best part of the championship. That is fair. Obviously, with certain teams we can't have repeat pairings and everything else, so could potentially be possible. Dublin is great, says what was a neutral venue from Dublin, Galway or Mayo. Yeah, I was mentioning that yesterday. I haven't a clue, to be honest. Maybe I seen someone say
like Nolan Park or something.
Yeah, Nolan Park maybe. Someone said the Gaelic grounds as well, which I don't think would be a bad show. But we'll have to wait and see. Tom says there won't be a lot in it, but Mayo will do it. There's no place to hide in either group for us to go for Connacht title at full tilt.
Completely agree.
Absolutely, yeah. Shane Walsh obviously got a lot of criticism after the Sligo game. Like, he obviously came back from injury and everything else. I think he only scored a point, and there does seem to be a lot of question marks over Shane Walsh at the moment in terms of commitments, in terms of how focused he is on Galway. What have you made of some of that criticism, and how do you reckon he'll get on in this game?
Yeah, like you don't need to watch me for 5 minutes to know that I absolutely cannot stand people criticize players as human beings, and not just like that their performance is a bit off. But Walsh is the best forward that Galway have. Like, you saw it in the All-Ireland final of 2022. When this guy's on it, he is on it. I think the Kilmacud situation and the Kilmacud championships, I think that they have taken a lot out of Walsh. I think that Kilmacud have embarked on 2 absolute marathons through the Dublin Club Championship, Leinster Club Championship, and then through to the Final Four. And like, they've had battles against Glen in both years where, make no mistake, all eyes are on Walsh. At most stops of the journey, all eyes are on Walsh. So I think he does feel the pressure, especially then when he comes back to Galway. I think he feels the pressure to deliver what he delivered in the 2022 All-Ireland final. Yeah, I personally think he has the potential to be one of the best forwards in Ireland again, if he gets back to 100% fitness and commitment, because I do think like he probably isn't what he was in 2022, but he absolutely has the potential to be. And I think that Joyce needs to stick with him, keep him in the team, keep him playing, and he's the type of flair player that he could just get going at any point. And the reality is Walsh on the ball as well. The minute Walsh comes on, like, I noticed this in the Kilmacud game when they played Raheny. Walsh only scored 1 point when he came off the bench, but he set up so much more because Shane Walsh got the ball and immediately 3 or 4 Raheny defenders were moving towards him, because he is the danger. He is the guy that you need to keep the ball away from. So he'd just throw a little shimmy, hand pass it into someone like a Darren Mullen, and they'd slot it over because there was less eyes on them. Walsh is a huge asset to Galway, and if they have any hopes of winning the All-Ireland, they need him at his best. So I would say don't criticize him, get behind him, be encouraging, be supportive to him, and you might see the best Shane Walsh.
Absolutely, yeah. Keane says Galway to win by a point or 2. And Michael says here, I reckon Pádraig Joyce would actually get on the current Mayo forward line on Sunday. Yeah, maybe in his prime.
He definitely would in his prime. That's the funniest thing is Pádraig Joyce at his best is by far clear as the best footballer between either of those teams. Yeah. Pádraig Joyce was a beautiful footballer.
Yeah,
I find it funny as well that you have certain players. You look, for example, in football like soccer. Did you see the clips of Thierry Henry coaching?
Yeah,
there's one clip in particular.
Possibly, yeah.
It sums up why Henry was a bad manager, because he was just like baffled at why these guys couldn't do what he could do.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Roy Keane kind of effect.
That he was like, why are you so shit? Like, what? Why can't you do what I could do? Whereas managers that are more used to like dragging players with them, like, it doesn't really surprise me that like a Jim Gavin was an insanely good manager, because Jim Gavin was a player that was a workhorse in that Dublin team. He wasn't the superstar in the Dublin team, but he was a worker bee. Like, he was a cog in the machine, and he was like used to dragging players with him as well. He was a leader for a young lad in the team. Like, Jim Gavin was one of the lads who would be putting the arm around him, that type. It doesn't really surprise me then that type of player goes on to be a great manager. Like, players that are good at it now, I'd imagine someone like a player that is like a really good captain. Like, I'd imagine someone like a Michael Murphy, a Lee Keegan, someone like that drags players with them to the finish line. I think they'd be good managers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, look, and there's plenty of examples out there. Like, even we'll get on to the hurling later, but I think Davy Fitz is nearly even an example maybe of that as well. But yeah,
like,
no,
yeah,
look,
like not a Dermot Connolly or a Tony Kelly, because like
hmm,
what was gas is my dad was saying that Tony Kelly is like almost the worst player for a coach to show to their team, because Tony Kelly does things that you shouldn't do, but Tony Kelly is so good that he can do them and
yeah,
score.
yeah,
Tony
yeah.
Kelly has a sideline at the corner flag and he shoots. He will
Hmm,
score because he's Tony Kelly, but you won't because you're not.
yeah, yeah.
But they'll still try it.
Yeah, no, he is a superhuman in fairness. But yeah, even getting back to Shane Walsh as well, like, even some of the criticism I think that's been labelled towards him, I think has been very harsh, like, especially coming off of, as you
Very
said,
Aidan O'Shea-esque.
yeah, like coming off of a very long club season, then obviously being injured. Yes, he only scored a point against Sligo. Maybe wasn't at his best. Maybe there was a certain element of rustiness. Do you know, like, maybe as well he wasn't anticipating Sligo being as good as they were, so he thought he could get away with more things. Do you know, that way? But look, I think he'd be bang up for this. And it wouldn't surprise me if he
And
put in
Galway
a
do, man.
real
Galway
big
give off
performance.
this aura that they could just
Hmm.
they could just
That is the thing, though, isn't it? Because like both of these two, you feel like you're just waiting for either one of these two to really click into gear. Because like Mayo have had a couple of good results in the championship here and there, but haven't looked like Mayo of last season, which is probably a good thing as well. Because I feel like last year they arguably sort of went in too strong and sort of ran out of steam. And Galway sort of similar as well. Like, again, few decent results here and there, but not a huge amount. So you're just waiting, and you're looking at this game, and you're hoping it's on Sunday, but you're just waiting for either one of these two to click into gear. And
But
whoever
that's
does
it.
will probably win.
Yeah, they seem like they're both very nervous about gassing out. They both
Mm.
seem like they're trying to manage their season. Like Mayo didn't go for the burst at the end against Roscommon. Like Mayo didn't put a beating on Roscommon. Mayo knew they had the game won, and they were like, okay, let's coast this home to the finish line.
Mm.
They weren't going hell for leather. Like, personally, I think Mayo are slightly more ahead right now. I will go with Mayo to win. I'll go for Mayo to win by about 3 points. But I think, like, Galway, for me, there's part of me that thinks that Galway almost have the higher ceiling. I'd rather have Galway's forward line.
Yeah. Yeah, because you do, like, obviously you've had a few young lads coming into Galway this year. Like, O'Correen's obviously been in phenomenal form. He's been a very good player. Obviously still missing players like Matthew Tierney and everything else. So there's a lot of young lads in that Galway side. Obviously Mayo do have young players as well, but they've probably been around maybe for a year or two longer than this Galway team. But I think both are very similar as well in terms of star players. I think from 1 to 15, like, you couldn't really split much between them. But in terms of Mayo, like,
from 9-15, it's 8 and 7, one way or the other.
In terms of Mayo, like, what kind of players would you look at that you think could really have a big game? Like Ryan O'Donoghue, who's obviously been in great form. You have Aidan O'Shea, who does tend to lay his marker in these type of games, in fairness. You've obviously got Tommy Conroy, who's been quiet enough, to be fair, and he's obviously had his fair amount of injury problems. But who would you be looking at to have a big game from a Mayo perspective?
Definitely Ryan O'Donoghue is the most consistent out of the three, I think I would say. Aidan O'Shea will do his stuff. I think he'll be heavily marshalled, especially after the goal against Roscommon. Like, that set Mayo on track for victory from very early doors. The fact that Aidan got that goal pretty quickly. Conroy is, like, I think Conroy's potential is savage. Like, when you see how he's able to go past players, like the pace that he has and his bravery as well, to be fair, like, he's such a direct runner. I think he could be absolutely awesome for Mayo. I personally think O'Donoghue will be the most dangerous out of the three of them. And I think if Galway can get a handle on him, I think it'll be interesting to see, do they put Sean Kelly on him, or will they go maybe with someone like a Liam Silk or someone like that? Because I think maybe it would be a bad decision for Galway to sacrifice Sean Kelly and his impact out around the half-back line midfield area. I think that they should keep him there and trust Liam Silk maybe to quieten O'Donoghue just a little bit. But I think it'll be really interesting, this one. see who they put on him. O'Shea will need to be marshalled a little bit because he got that goal very early against Roscommon, and he did seem to really sniff out the goal chance. It seemed like he was very much told by McStay to go for it if it popped up. And that set Mayo on the track for victory very, very early on. That goal was always between the two teams. So I think Galway will need to marshal him very early on, make sure that he doesn't get a goal chance like that. But yeah, I do think Mayo probably will hit early. I probably would say that that's how I think it's going to go. I think Mayo will hit a goal in the first 20, 25 minutes, and that will kind of prove to be the difference between the two teams. I'd say something like Mayo 114, Galway 14 points, something like that.
Yeah, I think it is going to be low scoring. Like both teams have been very low scoring, obviously throughout the league, throughout championship, obviously as well. In the last game, Dublin is great. Says O'Donoghue man of the match, and Darren says Galway need Shane and Damien playing well together. Yeah, that's the thing. You don't really get to see Walsh and Comer play together enough, and when they are playing together, I think Galway are very much a completely different team. You're going with Mayo to win. I'm going to go with Mayo to win it as well. I'm going to go for a 1-point win though, and I think even extra time might be potentially on the cards here. Like Mayo, like both of these two, I think it will be very cagey. To be honest with you, I think it will be very cagey. Maybe an early goal might open it up a little bit, but I do think it'll be very cagey. It will be very back and forth in terms of teams holding possession for large parts. And I think even midfield, I think could be absolutely huge as well. It'll be interesting to see if Diarmuid O'Connor is back in for Mayo. So we'll wait and see what happens there. We'll move on to the other provincial final, Clare versus Kerry in Ennis. Can't remember the last time there was a provincial final or Munster football final in Ennis. Definitely maybe been a while. But all in all, like Clare obviously did play Kerry in the final last year. I think that was actually in Ennis, wasn't it? Now that I think about it.
Off the top of my head, I honestly can't remember.
Yeah, I'll go back and have a look at that. But all in all, like, I mean, look, we know Kerry are going to come out on top here fairly comfortably. Like, are we going to learn that from this game, or is this just a case closed kind of scenario?
I don't think we'll learn much from this game, unfortunately. I don't mean any disrespect to Clare, but like the simple facts is Kerry won this game last year by 16 points, or it was 15 points. But I know they got the 5 goals, and Clare had 11 players in the panel last year that now are gone, and they were their 11 best players. A lot of people think like it was Owen Cleary, it was Keelan Sexton, it was Jamie Malone, it was Cian O'Dea, it was Cathal O'Connor, like Darren O'Neill. These guys are so important to how Clare were playing at the time. And to lose all of them and to lose Colm Collins, it would be extraordinary if Clare pushed Kerry to the wire, given what happened, like with, in the off-season, how many players they lost and the managerial change and everything like that. It would be extraordinary if they were able to push Kerry to within 5 points, in my opinion. I think Kerry should win this game by at least 5+. Mm-hmm. Like, it's something that I don't see how Clare can take such a hit like that. They have done remarkably well. Like, I genuinely mean it. They've done remarkably well. For Mark Fitzgerald to come in and to, get the performances out of that Clare group, and they should have been promoted. Like, they were that goal from Westmeath. If that had been, given to Clare, which it should have been, the decision, then Clare would have had more points at the end of it all than Westmeath, and they would have gone up to Division 2, which would have been an extraordinary achievement in itself for Fitzgerald to turn the ship around like that. Personally, though, I think it's a hell of a jump up from that to play the All-Ireland finalists and to beat them. I can see nothing other than a pretty comfortable Kerry win.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is going into the final last year, people did think, not necessarily, I think everyone expected Kerry to win quite comfortably, but I don't think people expected Kerry to beat them, and completely blow them out the water in the way that they did. In terms of double digits, I think people were saying maybe 8, 9, maybe 7 points is what people were expecting, given the fact that Clare had obviously beaten Cork and had been competing very well for Division 2 for a long time. There has obviously been a huge turnover of players. There still is a lot of very good players in there, like Emmett McMahon, a player I've been impressed with over the last few years. I remember seeing him at Croke Park against the Dubs. So like, can they go maybe off of that? Like, I mean, like, I suppose that you feel like maybe the objective for Clare is if they can get within 10, and I think it's probably similar when Louth play Dublin, get within 10, make the game a lot more competitive than what it was last year. But in saying that, like, I am clutching at straws a bit here, to be honest.
I think they need to look at what the Cork game was and what Cork did well. Because Clare don't fear Cork. And if Clare were in this game against Cork, Clare would back their chances to win, hence why they beat them last year. I think Clare need to look at what Cork did well, why Cork were able to stay in the game for such a long time, and try and take those elements. It's the same thing with the Louth game. I think Louth need to look at what Monaghan did, what Roscommon did against the Dubs last year, why Roscommon were able to draw with Dublin at Croke Park and should have beaten them, why Monaghan were able to stay in the game for so long in the All-Ireland semi-final. The honest answer is one of the main things that they did was they held on to the ball for an extremely long period of time. Whenever Monaghan had the ball against Dublin last year's semi-final, Monaghan held on to the ball for an extremely long period of time. They didn't let Dublin build up this fast, aggressive, attacking style of football, because whenever Monaghan held it, they slowed it down. I think Clare need to look at, what did Cork do well? Let's try and replicate some of that, and let's try and improve on it. And then they need to take every single chance they get, man. Aaron Griffin and Emmett McMahon need to have the games of their lives in the Clare forwards. And I'd be interested to see who they put on David Clifford as well.
Yeah, obviously David Clifford had an absolute stormer against Clare, obviously last year in that game in Limerick, and that was obviously the week.
And he was marked out of it against Cork, so he's got a point to prove.
Absolutely, yeah, and obviously last year, like the final, that was the week. Obviously, he lost his mother, obviously himself, and Paddy Clifford, and like they went on to have absolute stormers, in fairness, and David Clifford was man of the match, and that was the game he really sort of came to life, you would say, in the championship, and you'd imagine he'll be really well on it again, especially with the group stages fast approaching. So in terms of margin of victory, what you think? Will it 10 plus? I'd probably go 11, 12. Not too sure what the handicap is on this. I'd imagine it's probably around somewhere between 12 to 15.
I'm going 10. I'll go Kerry by 10.
Yeah, I think I'll go 11 points. But yeah, look, hopefully anyway, look, I'll be watching it, provincial final, that way. But hopefully it is competitive, but much like the Dublin Louth game, it possibly won't be. Before we touch on the hurling games, we'll just run through the group stages for both the All-Ireland and the Tailteann Cup, just to remind ourselves as to what happened here. So a reminder, these are how the group stages look. So Group 1, you've got the Connacht winners, the Ulster runners-up, Derry and Westmeath. Group 2, you've got the Leinster winners, Connacht runner-up, Roscommon and Cavan. Group 3, Ulster winners, Munster runner-up, Tyrone and Cork. Group 4, Munster winners, Leinster runner-up, Monaghan Meath. Obviously, a lot of them, obviously with the Leinster final and the Munster final, you can kind of gather who will be where. But Seamus, what was your thoughts on the draw?
I think I'd rather be in Group 4. Like, out of that, if you're Kerry, like, you're probably going to go in against Louth, Monaghan and Meath. I mean, there are 3 games that Kerry will win, you would imagine. Group 1 definitely looks like it would be the most tasty out of the 4. You'd imagine whoever, like, I think the big winners here is, like, I would say probably I would say Monaghan have ended up in a decent group, because obviously, like, they'll fancy their chances against Louth, so they'll fancy their chances to take second place. Tyrone, you'd imagine, will fancy their chances to beat, you would say, Clare. So I think there's a few winners and losers there. I think Westmeath have ended up in the worst possible group. Like that. That's going to be a very hard group for them to get out of.
Last year as well.
Yeah, I think the only way it could have got worse is if the Leinster winners were in there instead of Connacht.
Yeah.
They had Dublin, Derry and Armagh only got in with them. Good night.
Yeah. Like, I kind of wanted Westmeath, to be honest with you, just from family from there and everything else. It would have been nice to make the old trip down to Cusack Park, but wasn't meant to be. But look, hopefully they'll do well. But yeah, I do agree. Look, they did well in that group of death last year, in fairness. very competitive with Armagh. Arguably should have won. Drew with Tyrone, played very well against Galway as well. But I actually think that group is even tougher, to be honest with you, especially with Derry in there. But yeah, this is the Tailteann Cup group, so group stage draw. So you got Group 1, Kildare, Leitrim, Longford, Waterford. Group 2, Sligo, Antrim, Wexford, Tipperary. Group 3, Fermanagh, Laois, Wicklow, Carlow. Group 4, Down, Offaly, Limerick, and London. And probably should have explained this maybe earlier for the other group, for the All-Ireland group stages, but how it does work for anyone who isn't entirely sure. The group winners go straight through to the quarterfinals, and the second place teams play the third place teams at home. But in the Tailteann Cup, it's only, I think, the worst third place team doesn't go through, as far as I'm aware, to allow New York to come in. So yeah, Seamus, thoughts on that? I suppose Group 3 looks nice and tasty.
Group 3 definitely looks the most interesting out of the 4. Like, Wicklow obviously have a shock in them. Fermanagh, you would obviously say, should be the favourites to top the group, but Fermanagh had an absolute horrible Tailteann Cup last year, and they do have the odd bad performance in them. Like, Kildare really should top Group 1. Like, that's a group that if they don't top, I mean, come on, what on earth is going on if they don't top that group? Sligo, you'd imagine, will top Group 2. Tipperary, like, could be a nasty one to play for Antrim, Wexford, or Sligo, because they could spring a surprise. Down, you'd imagine, will top Group 4 with minimal fuss. It's interesting that they're laid out. Most of the tables are laid out more or less in the order that I actually expect them to finish. Yeah. I think Wexford will finish above Antrim, but apart from that, like, they're quite similarly laid out to how I think the tables will finish.
Yeah, like, absolutely. Like, I think even looking at the bottom seeds, like, you couldn't really see any of them nip into third. Maybe London ahead of Limerick, but yeah, I think it will be interesting nonetheless. Keane says Leitrim to walk through Group 1. Yeah, look, I think I'm not too sure how the fixtures will be with the Tailteann Cup, but you probably nearly would want to play Kildare now, because in the first game, just while they're still a bit bruised and battered, he might be able to cause the shock. But I feel like Kildare will probably beat Waterford and Longford, I'd imagine, and they'll gain a bit of confidence then, because they do.
The thing is, being in Croke Park, man, Kildare is still trying. You can't say that they're not trying. Like, I was watching them in Croke Park, and like, people are diving blocks, like throwing themselves in front of loud shots. You can't say that they're not trying. The one thing that I noticed that they were doing, which I was like, what? None of them wanted to pull the trigger going forward.
Yeah,
none of them wanted to be
lack of confidence. Lack of confidence.
Yeah. Kevin Feely and Dara Kieran were the only ones who were happy to shoot. The rest were all hand passing. Even Daniel Flynn wasn't pulling the trigger. Like, they had so many goal chances where they just played one hand pass too many, messed it up. And I was like, this is a team that is just completely shot to bits, confidence-wise.
Yeah. Like,
so you're right. You want to play them before they get a couple of wins under the belt.
Yeah, and I think even, like, I know obviously we'll preview the games and everything else when they come around, but I think Leitrim will take confidence from what they've seen Wicklow do. Do you know that way?
So I truly think Kildare will be. I think Kildare in 5 years could be the new Derry, and at the sense that it sounds so diluted now, but that you look at it, like where Derry were 5 years ago, they were in Division 4. But you look at the team that they put out against Leitrim in that Division 4 final, and Chrissy McCaig's there, Brendan Rodgers is there, Shane McGuigan is there, Conor Doherty's there, Kieran McFall. There's a lot of lads that are still in the team now. And once they clicked, they just got going. And you cannot say that Kildare do not have talent in that team. They do. So what they need is somebody to come in who's going to ignite it and get them turned the other way and singing from the same hymn sheet. Because while Derry's rise is extraordinary, you do also have to ask the question, how on earth did they end up down there in the first place? So I think Kildare, if they go Division 3, 2, 1, I think you still have to be like, well, what on earth happened that had you down in 3 in the first place?
Yeah, like the talent is there, the potential is there. Like, they have a couple of underage groups to work off of, that way. Like, you don't just have the one. Like, obviously they won the All-Ireland last year. They were in the final the season previous. You go back to 2016, 2018. So they have a couple of teams there to work off of.
So many lads are missing from that team, and Jimmy Hyland wasn't there. Kevin Flynn wasn't there.
Yeah, I think. Do you know what? Davy Burke, he's going to be the man to go in there at some stage.
Davy Burke was there. I saw him in the stadium, like just watching the game. Yeah, so never know. And with Roscommon going out of Connacht, like you would imagine, looking at that group, that they might not get out.
Yeah,
if they don't get out of the group, or if they don't get to the quarterfinal, it would be interesting to see if he sticks around.
Yeah, no, it depends on obviously who they get beat by, but I think if it was similar to last year, I would agree. In fairness, Joseph says Kildare will even win the Tailteann Cup, even though they're surely favourites for the competition.
I've made down my favourites.
Yeah, I'd probably look towards Fermanagh. I think Sligo could really have a good crack at it though as well, to be honest. Do
you think Sligo would beat Kildare? They drew with them last year.
Yeah, I think the thing is Croke Park probably would suit Kildare more. Do you know that way? I think if Sligo got Kildare at home in Markovich Park or something like that, I'd fancy Sligo. But if it was in Croke Park, Kildare probably are a team that's more used to playing there. Do you know that way? Like, I think the open spaces and everything suits a lot more so their players. But look, who knows? Who knows? Could be wrong on that.
Yeah. I mean, the pitch is massive in Croke Park, and that's one thing that a lot of people. That comment there, I'd be interested in that one, the infight one. Been a lot of infighting there over the years. Yeah, I did hear about that. That the club rivalry in Derry is fierce, so it was hard to get them all singing off the same hymn sheet. But obviously, the management team that came in, they did get them singing off the same hymn sheet, and I mean, maybe you could do the same in Kildare, because you don't know. You would look at it and say something. That's the one thing I've been saying the whole time, is something isn't clicking somewhere, because it's like if you had all the perfect ingredients to make the most wonderful cake and it came out trash, like absolutely awful. Like it just, you don't know what's going on, because all the players are there. The juvenile structures are there that are producing these players. Like they produced last year's player of the year for the competition, James McGrath, who is nowhere to be seen in the panel now. Yeah. And you wonder, like, did he look at it and just go, nah? And if he did, why? Like, is there something there that he just thought, not for me?
Yeah, Beast 475 says, lads, Clare man here. I'm saying Clare going to win by a late goal. There we go. There we are. You heard it here first. I'd love that, to be fair, as a Dublin fan, but probably won't see it happen. Roscommon and Cavan could be a shock. And who's your shock team to get to the quarters?
Let's have a look at the groups there to figure that out.
That's a tough one. Yeah, we'll have a look here again. Hard to really know. I think Cork could do it.
What defines a shock?
Yeah,
like, something that because I'm immediately looking at that thinking.
I would say a Division 2 team. I would say would be
relegated from Division 1 count.
Yeah, like you could say Monaghan would be a shock to get there, but I do think there is a team in Monaghan still. They were semi-finalists.
I think if I was Monaghan, man, I'd be absolutely delighted with that group
to get to a quarter-final. Yeah,
you've gotten what will be Louth. You'd imagine Monaghan will win that game, and then I'd back them to beat Meath as well. So they get out in second place, giving them home advantage against one of the third place teams who, like, real quick, I'll say who I think it will be. I think Cork in Group 3, Armagh in Group 1, and let's say, I don't know, Roscommon or Cavan in Group 2. I'd Monaghan at home against one of those teams. I'd back them to do it.
Yeah, I'd probably look towards Cavan maybe as well, because they were very good against Tyrone.
Cavan were very good, yeah.
They've been very competitive in almost every game they've played in, barring that game where they got hammered by Armagh, but like that was obviously towards the end of the league.
Because we always have a fairy tale in Monaghan, though, don't we? As well, we always have the feel good story, and we haven't quite had it yet this year. I know we had the victory over Dublin in round 1, but they ended up getting relegated, which kind of soured that. I feel like there has to be a revival somewhere, and I think this could be the one.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose that wraps up the football action, but let us know anyway in the comments who's what your predictions are, obviously, for the games, and what you made of the group stage draw predictions, and yeah, feel free to let us know your shock prediction maybe for the quarterfinals. So yeah, we'll move on to the hurling action then, and there isn't too many games to run through. One game in Leinster, one game in Munster, 3 in the Joe McDonagh. So we'll start with the game in Leinster. Wexford versus Galway at Wexford Park. Wexford obviously coming in on the back of that shock loss to Antrim that I don't think anybody saw coming, and Galway coming in on the back of a draw versus Kilkenny. Many people saying Galway very much left that one behind them, and I think Wexford obviously will probably feel very similar about the Antrim game. Again, they will feel that they should have won. So yeah, look, I mean, it's an interesting one. Like, after Antrim beating Wexford, you would say Galway should beat Wexford and they should be the favourites and they should do it. But Wexford are such a strange county when it comes to the Leinster Championship. Like, they've won 5 games.
So weird.
They've won 5 games out of their last 14 since they won the Leinster Championship in 2019. 5 out of 14 Leinster Championship games. And I think 2 of those wins have been against Kilkenny. 1 has been against Galway. Like, it's a bit of a bizarre record that Wexford have, but they always seem to raise their games against big teams. And I don't know, like, I'd be half tempted to actually back Wexford to win this, which sounds a bit bizarre, but what do you think?
So was it. Like, me and Matthew were talking about it after the Antrim game, and we were like, this is just classic Wexford, like, of course. And I was like, why is it always Wexford that get caught? Why? Like, and that's Beast's comment there. Like, we're not sure about Galway either. The reality is Galway played a Kilkenny team at home that were without Owen Cody, Adrian Mullen, Owen Murphy, and there was Michael Kerry as well, wasn't there? And they had to get a late equaliser to get the draw. So, like, Shefflin, I think, will be coming out of that game actually livid that they didn't win, because Galway put out a pretty full-strength team. Wexford, this is a dangerous game for Galway, because Wexford have, what we've seen about Wexford is that they're fantastic at digging holes for themselves, digging their own grave almost. But then they're also fantastic at getting themselves out of said hole. They're always fantastic at saving themselves at the last minute. And now Wexford have already put the gun to themselves. So Galway, this is really dangerous, because Galway haven't been in the position against Wexford, or Wexford are fighting for their lives against them. It's usually been Kilkenny that are in this position. So if I was Galway, I'd be nervous going into this game. And, like, it is one of those that the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, I think Wexford are going to take something off them. But I don't think Wexford are going to beat them. Wexford this season have been a team full of draws. So I'm going to go for a draw.
Yeah, do you know, I was kind of thinking of going for a draw as well, to be honest with you. Dublin is great, says there is something wrong with Wexford. Galway 224, Wexford 20. Wexford seem to raise their standards against higher ranked teams.
Absolutely do. I'm like, because Matthew asked me something. I'd be interested to get your take on it as well as a fellow Dub. Matthew said, why are Dublin more consistent against Antrim, Westmeath, Laois, Carlow than Wexford are? Why are Dublin more consistent?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what it is. We just seem to beat the teams we should be able to beat, but it's against the bigger teams where we just completely roll over. Like, with Dublin, it's just more straightforward for whatever reason. Well, we might have the odd surprise. I think maybe because it's happened to Dublin in the past, especially with Laois. I think that was a real wake-up call for a lot of them Dublin lads. And I think that game
Wexford have had 6 or 7 wake-up calls. Wexford are
they've had a few now.
The alarm over and over again. Like, that's fine.
But I think Dublin. Yeah, but I think Dublin as well, though, probably look at it more realistically. And I think Micheál Donoghue, because Dublin obviously don't have the history of Wexford hurling, and do you know that way. Obviously, Dublin is a huge county, and we know that, and they probably should be producing better players. But in terms of, like, standards, Wexford's, in terms of history and everything else, and players that they have, is higher. So I think they always back themselves in any game they go into. But it leaves themselves open a little bit, and I think they go into games maybe a little bit complacent and think we should win this fairly handily. And then I think when they face a bit of adversity against smaller teams, they seem to really struggle.
Funny enough, I gave more or less the same answer. Like I said, I feel like Dublin, we know where we're at. We know who we should beat, and we know who we probably don't have a chance of beating. And that's why, like, against Kilkenny and Clare, not only do we lose, but we usually get our ass whooped. Whereas against Antrim and Westmeath, you very rarely see us mess up. It's usually a 6.7 point win for Dublin, and they get out of there. Whereas Wexford, it seems like they stroll in, they're like, yeah, we'll win this. Oh, whoops, we lost. Now we're just going to have to beat Kilkenny, and then they do it. Which must be infuriating. But for Rossiter, he's gotten a lot of draws throughout the league campaign, throughout the championship as well, drawn with Dublin in round 1. I think this is in the territory of a draw again. Because remember, Galway drew at Wexford, I think it was a couple of years ago. Last time they played each other in Wexford Park.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Like you feel like Galway should win though. Like with the talent that they have, with the players that they have. Like Cathal Mannion was obviously very good the last day. Gavin Lee, I think, has been a great addition into the team as well. Brian Concannon's in decent form. So like, you feel like Galway should win. They should beat them based off of the players that they have. But at the same time, like Lee Shin is in extraordinary form for Wexford after 2-11 versus Antrim. So
she couldn't have done anything more. Like
yeah. Do you know what I mean? And kind of mad, like getting mad at a match against Antrim, having that tally but still not winning. It is kind of bizarre, to be honest. But yeah, like looking at Galway, like with the talent and players that they have, what Henry Shefflin's obviously trying to build, they should win this. They should sense the opportunity, because if Galway were to lose, then all of a sudden, like it kind of nearly blows that Leinster final place wide open. And I think it would potentially work very well for Dublin, provided obviously they beat Antrim in 2 weeks' time or whatever.
Yeah, I think Antrim and Dublin would be absolutely over the moon if Wexford get the win. Yeah, or like you never know. It could be a dangerous one. I think maybe Dublin would be looking at this hoping that Galway win. Because then if Dublin beat Antrim, Dublin are leg ahead of Wexford. I think I think that Dublin will be hoping for Galway to win this one. So yeah, if anybody's going to win, it's going to be Galway. But in all sense, I do think it will be a draw. I just have this unshakable feeling. I think it's going to be a draw.
Yeah, no, I think I'll actually agree with you on that one. Dublin says here, I would like Wexford to win this, and no excuses for Dublin and the hurling, big enough county to be 50-50. Yeah, look, they probably should be producing maybe better players in hurling, but look, I suppose that's a conversation for another day. In fairness, the other hurling game, there's no other games on in Leinster. Bit of a sort of split week this week, but that's how it is. But the other game, or senior game, a high profile game, we should say, Waterford against Tipperary in Walsh Park. Liam Cahill coming down to his old stomping grounds. Liam Cahill versus Davy Fitz. No love lost between the two of them. Like, there's been some very interesting comments coming out of media from either one of them, like in the build up to this. Like Davy Fitz has been saying that Waterford, where the confidence was absolutely on the floor when he first took them over, kind of implying that like the manager before him wasn't able to get confidence in the lads. And Liam Cahill's been going back to Derek McGrath's comments as well, so he's been having a bit of go at him. So look, there's going to be blood, thunder, guts really laid out on the pitch on Saturday. I can't wait for this one.
Certainly will be. And as you said, like Davy Fitz is going to have these lads riled up. Like I reckon, like, because the way that Liam Cahill like consistently said, I'm not going to Tipperary, I'm not going to Tipperary, and then off he went. And just remember at the time being like, I remember just looking at Waterford thinking like, well, I don't know how you ever thought that he wouldn't go to Tipperary eventually. Like, this is what this was all for. It's the same thing for me with Galway with Henry Shefflin. Like, I don't understand this whole concept of hiring managers from other counties. Like, if you're at the level where you are good enough to go for All Irelands, or you're good enough to go for Munster Championships or Leinster Championships, I don't think you should be hiring a manager who looks destined to take over at another team. Henry Shefflin, for me, at one point anyway, looked destined to be the next Kilkenny manager. Do you know the last time it worked to yield an All Ireland, Aaron? Hiring a manager from another county?
I can't really think of anything in hurling.
1998.
There we go.
Michael Bond with Offaly. In football, 2001. John O'Mahony with Galway.
There we go. There we are.
So it doesn't work. Like, it really doesn't work. I think for that,
I think it works. I think it works with the smaller counties to a certain extent. Like,
it works to get your level higher. It works to get your level higher, but I don't think it works in the ultimate game. Yeah. I don't think it's worse than the ultimate game, because I'm not saying that the players look over and see a manager from a different county and think, well, we're not playing for him. They're playing for their county. But I think when you think that you are good enough to go and win the All-Ireland, I think you go with one of your own. I really do. I think it's something that is just a little bit of a trend among counties that you see. Like John Kiley came into Limerick. They had John Allen, they'd had Donald O'Grady, but then they went with Kiley when they were like, right, time to go. Same thing. Like, I know they had TJ Ryan in before as well, but like Clare brought in Davy Fitz when it was time to cash in on this golden team. Like, I personally think that, for example, with the Liam Cahill situation, that when he went to Tip, I think that just would have hurt Waterford a lot, because it was like a situation of course he was going to be Tipperary boss. Of course he was going to, like, how did you not see that coming?
Yeah, like, and to be fair, like, they obviously beat Tipperary last year. Like, after they'd obviously already been gone. So they do have that Waterford over Tip. But it is mad, like, the scenario going into this game. If you did,
Tipperary were shocking against Limerick.
Yeah, like if we were sitting here 2 weeks ago, we would have been predicting Tipperary to win this, by 4 or 5. But now it's the complete opposite way. After, as you said, Tipperary. Like,
it's crazy how one game can just
poor how they looked against Limerick.
It's crazy how just one game can just change the dynamic around their county. Because Waterford, coming into this game against Cork, the first game, they were like absolutely everyone's pick to finish 5th. Waterford were the pick that everybody was saying, there's your 2 points on the board. For them to beat Cork really shook up the Munster Championship. And then Tipperary were so bad against Limerick. I know Limerick were very good and they were much better than they were against Clare in round 1, but Tipperary weren't good either. And they had the long run into it. They had the break. You'd wonder what on earth had them so flat on the first game. It's difficult. Tipperary need to win this. Liam Cahill will have them fired up. Absolutely fired up. But I think Waterford and Walsh Park, Davy Fitz, I think Waterford nicked this by a point.
Yeah, I'd probably lean towards Waterford as well, to be honest. It's just a massive opportunity, like such a short turnaround for Tipperary as well. Like, would they have been able to work on all the problems, all the things that went wrong in a space of a week in the build up to this game? I don't really know if you can.
Waterford had the break. They had a week to sit back, watch Tip. Davy Fitz was at the game. He was at the Tipperary Limerick game, watching.
Yeah, no, it's not looking good at all. Like, and because even the younger lads for Tipperary, like, they have had underage success, and there's no doubt about it. It's kind of similar to Cork to a certain extent, and Beast has a good comment here as well. Big problem for Cork and Tip, can't pump in the under 20 lads. Limerick and Clare good at that. That's what separates them.
But Limerick constantly have new saviours, like Donegal Dollig against Clare. In he comes, hits a goal. Like, they constantly have a new guy stepping up. Carl O'Neill stepped up last year. Like, they have lads waiting in the wings, like Shane O'Brien, like Adam English, Colin Coughlin. Like, these lads that have been waiting for their chance, and you'd imagine they'll take it when it comes. Whereas you're right, like Cork and Tip, they seem to struggle to get these lads in, and there's a lot of lads that have been really good for the under-20s that they've really found it hard to give them a permanent spot in the team. I said that the biggest difference for me is you look at Limerick's 6 forwards. If everybody in Limerick is fit, you know exactly who Limerick are going with for their 6 forwards. You know it's Hegarty, Lynch, Morrissey, Casey, Gallan and Flanagan.
Yeah.
I haven't a breeze who Cork are going with. I know Horgan's going to be there. But apart from that, Robbie O'Flynn maybe at right half and Shamey Hannity at the centre. But the rest, like, God knows who's going to be there.
Yeah, and it's up in the air with Tipperary as well. Like, obviously Bonner Mars coming on, Noel McGrath's coming on late on to try and save the day. Like, obviously Jake Morris has been very consistent and been brilliant for Tipperary since coming in. He had an off day the last day. Jason Ford's obviously Mr. Reliable, in fairness. And they've obviously had a few retirements and everything else with big players in the last few years. But yeah,
looking centre back, man. They, like, you have a breeze who's going to play centre half back for Tip. One day it's Robert Byrne, next day it's Brian O'Mara, then it's Brian McGrath, then it's Owen Connolly. They need to just pick one.
Yeah, you be going Waterford then by a point.
Waterford by a point for me in dramatic fashion, and then we'll have an interesting handshake at the end with Davey and Liam Cahill.
Yeah, it'd be mad as well. Like that'd be Tipperary probably almost done and dusted because they wouldn't be able to catch Waterford, wouldn't be able to catch Limerick, and still
They'd
maybe
have to beat Clare and Cork. They'd have to beat Clare and Cork and hope that results fall for them.
Yeah, and would that even be enough?
I don't see them beating both of them. I think if they lose this, they're gone, which is nuts.
Yeah, it is crazy, but that is the Munster Championship. Yeah, I'm going to go for a 2-point win there for Waterford. But yeah, anyone who's tuning in, let us know your predictions in the comments. 3 games in the Joe McDonagh Cup. No other games in the lower tiers, so it's just the Joe McDonagh Cup game. So we have Down against Westmeath first up here. You'd imagine Westmeath should bounce back 2 defeats on the spin. If they were to somehow lose this, you'd nearly start thinking Westmeath could end up in the Christie Ring, which would be absolutely mental. But they should, by all accounts, come back and win this.
They really should. I've been very surprised with their start. I mean, losing to Kerry on the first game was a bit of a, like, you more so looked at Kerry and thought, like, you know, what a great performance. Offaly then beat them in round 2. You're thinking, I would have tipped Westmeath as probably one of the front runners to win the competition, especially when you've seen how close they were last year to staying up in the Liam McCarthy. But they need to win this. I would go with Westmeath to beat Down here.
Yeah, no, I would as well. I think they should bounce back to get the victory. Will they get to the Joe McDonagh Cup final? Probably not. They probably left themselves too much to do, but they need to give themselves the best possible chance at doing it. Meath and Offaly, again, like Laois obviously put 7 goals past Meath the last day. I'm not saying Offaly are necessarily going to do that, but you would expect Offaly to comfortably get past Meath.
Absolutely. If Offaly have any ideas about getting out of the John McDonagh, especially after seeing what Laois did, a comfortable win here is the absolute bare minimum that they should do.
Yeah, and I think they will, to be fair. Like they bounce back, obviously, with a win versus Westmeath, and that was a big win for them. Be interesting to see if they get any more players sent off after 30 or 40 seconds this time around. But yeah, a little bit of a mad game that. But yeah, you would expect Offaly to get the job done. And Kerry versus Laois, arguably the most interesting one, this one, just in the sense that Kerry obviously have 2 wins on the bounce, first versus second in the Joe McDonagh. So like Laois should win because Laois are the favourites, I think, for this competition now, and rightly so, given how well they've looked in the opening 2 games. Kerry, it's hard to, obviously you don't always get to see a lot of them, in fairness, but Maurice O'Connor's looks fairly decent there. Laois should win, but could there be an upset here?
There definitely could be an upset. Kerry are very strong in the Joe McDonagh Cup always, like, hence why they've been making finals over the last 5 years pretty consistently. Personally, I think Laois will win this. I think Laois have kind of highlighted themselves as being the team to watch in the Joe McDonagh Cup. I think, like, if you look as well, like the experienced campaigners they have, like Paddy Purcell and the Rowland and like Ross Dunphy, like these are still the lads doing the stuff for Laois. Like these are still the lads leading the way, and it's really, really, you know, good to see for Laois that, you know, that team that beat Dublin in 2019 and, you know, really put it up to Tipperary, who went on to be All-Ireland champions. That team isn't completely gone. It hasn't completely faded away. They are making a comeback. You know, beating Offaly on the first day out was a good win, but I did tip them to win that, and people did tip them to win that. But to hammer Meath the way that they did is a real statement that, you know, we're out of here. We're out of the John McDonagh. We are a problem for this division. And I expect them to beat Kerry.
Yeah, no, I would as well. I'd expect Laois to have far too much there from a Laois perspective. So yeah, I'll go with Laois to win that one. Before we finish up, then, in terms of player of the week, bet of the week, you can choose one from football and hurling if you want. I mean, there's really, I suppose with football, I don't think there really is a bet of the week, to be fair. So maybe skip over that one. But yeah, in terms of player of the week for football hurling, what would you be looking at?
Player of the week. I think David Clifford is a good shout. I think he has a good game in him. Player of the week for football, Ryan O'Donoghue. Mayo to win, Ryan O'Donoghue to play well.
There we go. Yeah, I'm going to go Shane Walsh for Galway to silence the doubters. Even Mayo, even though I predict Mayo to win, I still think
You'd be right about something then.
yeah, exactly. You're right somewhere down the line. For hurling, what would you be aiming towards?
Bet of the week.
Or even player of the week. Bet of the week.
Underdog bet of the week is Wexford to beat Galway.
It is, yeah.
Player of the week Leach in.
Yeah, I think so. To back it straight back up after last week. I think for myself, I'd probably go Calum Lyons maybe for Waterford. Was very impressive. I thought the last day out versus Cork, and I think he'll have a big game and have a big say versus. Actually, you know who I'll go? I'll go Desi Hutchinson actually, because I think he's a player, because he was arguably the best player for Waterford under Liam Cahill. So if anyone has to prove anything, I think it will be him. I think I'll go Desi Hutchinson, and then bet of the week, probably nothing really there, but I think Wexford Galway is certainly one that would look a little bit tasty. I think we'll go ahead and wrap this one up here. Seamus, thank you very much for jumping on, and anyone who tuned in, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, helps the channel out. If you can share this with your friends and family, that'd be perfect as well. Leave a rating on any podcasting apps that you're listening on as well, and that would be absolutely brilliant. So we'll speak to you all again.